Going live. Good morning, everyone. This is our weekly webcast, and again, I'm having an issue logging some people in here. Guy, who is trying to log in, who was supposed to be our guest last week, is still trying to log in, but I have Tyler, our techie, working on that, so I'm hoping he shows up soon. But this is our weekly webcast, and so I'm going to continue to talk about some of the things that we're doing here in the office and how we're being successful at some things and other things we're dropping the ball on and having problems with, because that's what we do as humans, is we continually try to improve what we're moving forward with. So we have gone through a few versions of the website that we are using to sell our project management courses. One of the things that we do is this webcast. We do Twitter feeds where we send out information that has to do with project management. We send out Facebook information. We send out blogging information. We have this whole social web that we're using to advertise what we do here. And so it's all very exciting, except for the fact that we don't know what's working and what isn't. And so in order to do that, what I did in the last couple of days is I spent some time looking at Google Analytics. If you've never looked at Google Analytics, it's very, very cool as to what you're capable of doing inside Google Analytics, and it will allow you to do all sorts of different things as far as going in and tracking whether or not this Twitter message is a campaign by itself, that one Twitter message, and how many people are actually reading it, and how many people does that bring to the website. And then once they get to the website, what do they actually click on? So in Google Analytics, it's possible to set up goals as to what the people are doing as they work their way through the website, and it will tell you where people dropped off on the website. It doesn't tell you why they dropped off, but it does tell you where. And after a couple of days of collecting data, you can start to see some of the trends that will happen on inside your web page, and then you can decide whether or not we're able to go in and say, okay, this is not a good page, or that's a good page, and so on. One of the things that I've been doing over the last 13 years is building up my I don't know, IP, or my ability to contact a lot of people on the World Wide Web. So one thing I did 2 days ago or yesterday, I can't remember exactly when I sent out the message, but I put a thing in my blog that just said, will you please look at this web page and tell me what you think? Which was very interesting because I got lots and lots of feedback on the new web page. That feedback for me is very interesting because one of the things that came up immediately was a mistake that I made by putting a whole pile of images on the front page, which makes it very lively, and because I'm into that art world, I kind of like the web pages that look like that. But there was a couple of statements made that seems to be fairly juvenile and very colorful and not very business orientated, which some of the comments you have to take with a grain of salt, because you have to, at the end of the day, feel good about what you created and whether or not it's going to do what it's meant to do. I firmly believe that even the real serious adults like to have fun once in a while, and so a fun, lively, colorful web page with lots of images on it is still well received by the business world. And the business world is changing from the stuffy wearing a tie and having these nice professional haircuts and being all business-like, the power suit and dressing for success and all those type of things, I think is starting to apply to the web pages as well. And the traditional corporate web page tends to scare away people more than invite them in. So I'm hoping that our change to our web page and the way we've moved since I've got here will be a positive thing, and we'll start to see some success on that. The thing that is very difficult and time-consuming in data analytics, when you're talking about the Google's approach to things, is you have to make sure to include all your elements. So the YouTube videos, all our YouTube videos pull data into our web page, which is our goal. From our web page, we want to draw them into the course. We want them to register, and so that's all part of our goal in the long run, is to move that stuff forward. So, well, looky here. I think we have our guest speaker here, which is good. And welcome, Guy. I'll get to you in a second here. I'm just talking about Google Analytics.
Sure,
and how
sure.
it does allow us to migrate and move through the the web page and track some
Okay,
of the
my
success.
apologies.
Oh, you don't have to apologize at all. So when I'm working on the analytics, the nice thing is as you look at the flow of people going into the website, it actually tells you what pages are of interest and whether or not your headings are correct in order to draw people's interest into them. And what is the most commonly, like obviously your home page is the one that everyone hits first, but what do they go to next? And what do they go to after that? And it helps you with the labeling of the web page. The thing that I did very quickly yesterday when I sent out the invite to everybody to comment on the web page is you get a lot of different perspectives on what people think web pages should look like. And a few years back, I actually had a woman tell me that I create very masculine web pages and not very good female web pages, and I'm not too sure what exactly that meant, and sat down with her over lunch and she explained to me exactly why I create very masculine web pages. And there's all sorts of characteristics that make your web page masculine or female. And that to me was an eye opener because I didn't know that there was such a thing. And we did spend a little bit of time talking about that. And since then, being a little bit more artsy fartsy, I've been trying to incorporate some of the female elements into the web page so it's less gender specific. And I don't know if that is an actual thing, but that's what happens when you start to do analytics is you start to second guess what you're doing, and sooner or later you just have to jump off the bridge and hope what you're doing is correct. So I would like to move to the next aspect of this this Google Hangout and invite a guy who has finally got onto our webpage. I have to apologize for last week. I'm sorry about that, guy, and I'm happy that you're here today and that you've gotten into the site. So what I would like to do is I would like you to spend a few minutes first explaining to us how you fit into this relationship, who you are, and why we actually want to talk to you.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. My apologies. I was getting into the wrong site there for a little while. Just let me know if you can hear me okay.
It sounds great, so continue.
Okay,
and
I'm getting a little
forward.
bit of feedback here, but I'll try to ignore that. Okay, my name is Guy Paterson. I think everybody on the call is very familiar with me. It looks like we don't have any other guests out there that I see on the session here. From a project management point of view, I've been involved in projects for a number of years. Just a little bit of my background for those that don't know me. My background is in the healthcare sector, and I trained as a pharmacist many years ago. And probably going back about 30-some years, I drifted into the IT area. And even a little bit before in the pharmacy section, I got into the area of project management.
So, Guy, what you're saying is that you were a drug pusher when you were younger.
Absolutely.
You were a drug
dealer? Legal.
Okay, continue.
I'm not legal now, but I was legal then. Yeah. So yeah, and I at that time I really didn't realize the significance of project management in successfully carrying out the duties that we had. Many of the things we got involved with were when I look back at them, were very, very highly refined projects and so on. So I really didn't get into the philosophy of project management till probably into the early 90s. I shouldn't say that. Probably mid to late 80s, we were doing some significant work. One was the building of the Saskatoon City Hospital, which was a major actually it was a 15-year project when I think back, but right from the first ideas, and I was involved in that project right from square one. I was one of the first director level people to write a functional plan for that particular facility, and that goes back probably at least 12 to 14 years before it was built. And I guess that, looking back at that gave me a really good understanding of the need to clearly understand the objectives before you start into a project. I can remember one of the key people who was involved in the building construction had a sign behind his desk that said, vast project often start with half-vast ideas. So you have to understand what the objectives are before you progress along those particular areas. So when I left the health region, started out on my own, I knew I needed to become more familiar with that, and at that point, I did get my PMP designation, and I really began to understand the importance of all aspects of project management in the whole scheme of things. At the same time, I identified a number of other certifications that I did need to get to go with the PMP, and one of the ones was to develop understanding of ability to assess projects and audit projects. At the time within the health sector, there were multi-millions of dollars, in fact billions of dollars going into the IT area, and I wanted to, I guess I saw opportunities in making sure that investment did reap rewards. So I also, besides the PMP, I obtained certification as a Certified Information Systems Auditor, Certified Information Security Manager because of the issues with security in the health sector, as well as a little later picked up a certification on risk management in those particular areas. So I was armed with through that period of time, armed with at least 5 certifications, I guess, because I did get one specifically in the area of health information systems management from the U.S., and I worked in those particular areas. So that's a bit of my background. So I've been involved in all kinds of projects, from building hospital to implementing provincial-wide information systems. From a project management point of view, and I'll refer to it a little later as I'm discussing some of these things, one of the more interesting projects that I had done was to audit a major implementation in Manitoba, and this goes back about 4 or 5 years, I guess. They had a project to implement the ability for physicians across the province to see X-ray images. And the project was identified at about $35 million. It was a project that was 4 years in length. And when they were about a third of the way through the project, they realized that they had spent approximately half the money and had achieved none of the deliverables, and were very concerned. They were already going back to the provincial government for an additional $8 million. And myself, and as a information systems auditor and project auditor, got called in, and I partnered up with a fellow from Vancouver who was a expert in radiology systems, and we went in and had a look at the entire project. We were given carte blanche to look at everything from how the project was organized, how it was staffed, the role of vendors within the project, and all those types of things. So that was an interesting thing, and I'll touch on a few of the areas that we see as major things that you have to consider in the whole area of project management and governance and so on. So that's a bit of my background. So Darren, any comments or questions?
Yeah, no, it's a lot of that stuff I didn't know, so it was nice. Like, even though we've been talking on and off for the last 6 months or so, it's nice to hear your actual official background and some of the things you've done, because you seem to be a very humble person and don't bring a lot of that stuff to the forefront. So it's nice to hear that you are as the expert as everyone thinks you are. So that's great. Just a couple of questions. One of the things that, as I started to learn a little bit more about this project management, do you find it difficult in any environment to talk the project management and walk the project management model if the rest of your employees don't understand what it is?
Definitely. That's one of the issues that I want to raise here. That is communication, and that includes people who are working with you on the project, those people that are doing the heavy lifting on the project, and those could be from your side as a project manager. It could be from the client side as accepting those things. And part of that communication, you do have to get a solid understanding of where those resources within the project are coming from, what their objectives are, what their understanding is of the deliverables of the project, and what their understanding is of the methodology used to manage that project. And that's communications isn't just a loudspeaker blaring in people's ears. Communications is two-way communications, talking and listening, and with the emphasis on listening. So I think that's a key attribute of a successful project manager, is to be able to get a good vibe on what people understand, what their agenda is. And people have different agendas. They don't all have to have your agenda, because you're dealing with people executing the project as well as people that will have to accept and live with the results of those projects. You have to understand both those folks. So communications is a key area. Okay.
The other thing that I find that, and a lot of people when they talk about project management, the first thing they think about is, oh, it's just another layer of bureaucratic mess up crap that I have to do that is not going to get me any closer to achieving my goals or anything like that. And I spend my whole day now doing all this paperwork and writing stuff down and following objectives and doing all this stuff. If someone came to you and you were the boss of the project, and I came to you and said, well, I think this is just stupid and I don't want to do all this writing down and following this whole process because it's slowing me down, how would you deal with something like that if you heard that from one of your employees or the people that you're supervising as a project manager?
That gets into the whole area of identifying risks in the project, because that is a key risk in the project, is clearly not identifying what is being done, how decisions are made. And I guess the world is littered with failed projects where people did not document, did not manage the information that was required for the project, did not keep records up to date, and when the project goes south, there's no issues to document that out. And that also gets back to the communications thing, making sure that the communications with the owners of the project, the stakeholders of the project, and the executives of the organization and responsible for the project are clearly informed and clearly understand the decisions they make. It's the role of the project manager to make sure that the decision makers for the project clearly understand the ramifications of the decision they're made. A lot of decisions may seem minor, but nothing can be taken lightly, because a minor decision to make a course correction can have a huge impact on the end product of the project. If you're sailing across the ocean and the captain said, okay, you steer 95 degrees, but give or take 3 or 4 degrees in either way, or make that correction. When you get across the ocean, you're and they're in a risk. And again, that is listening, making sure you get feedback on all those issues.
Right. That is sort of the same thing that I'm finding as I get further and further into the project management culture, and it's a big catchphrase for a lot of people now, and a lot of people are very excited about it. And so it's one of the reasons why we wrote the courses that we did, is that we have 3 different levels of courses. The first one being the fundamentals, which is more for the people who are not really involved with the project but have to understand the language so that they can assist the people who are directly involved with it. And then associate one, which is a little bit more in depth, and then we have the professional one, which will allow you to and will assist you in getting your PMP status. Because the PMP status is held in such high regard, if you were hiring a group of people, how much weight would a PMP behind someone's name carry when it comes down to your ability to incorporate them into a project that you're involved with? Is it something that you as an employer would look for, or is it more someone who is willing to adapt and change and have their own processes to move forward? Because I am finding that if the PMP culture is in place, then there's a little bit of friction in the office in order to continue to move forward in that culture.
It would depend very much on the role I expect that person to execute within the project. Anyone in a project project director, project management, looking after project management office certainly would be there. I guess one of the issues I see is the team you put together has to have multiple skills. So certainly on the project team, you want people with subject matter expert in the area of the project. If you staff the project with people that only have knowledge of the project process without a knowledge of the elements of the industry, the understand more than just reading what the requirements are, but understand in depth what the requirements are and what the endpoint needs to be in the project. That's just as important. So certainly it would be identifying a key mix of skill sets in those areas. There are plenty of excellent project managers who are poor at documentation, and there are plenty of project manager experts that are great at documentation but poor at communication. So I think those are the things you want to do. So it's a factor that builds into there, and the more that person would be in actually being at the helm. The project manager director is really not the captain. The captain is the executive owner of the project. You're the helmsman, and you have to steer that ship. So looking for those skill sets that understand the importance of course readjustment, the importance of communicating with the captain, which way you need to go, to identify for the captain that you've run this route before and you see the rocks are ahead, you can't see them because they're under the water, but you alert the captain that Captain, you want to go that direction, but we have to first go this direction, then that direction to avoid those rocks that will wreck this project. So it's a mix of key people.
That actually answered the next question I had, and that was one of the things that I always find amazing is that when you get into a project, you have your engineers, you have if you're in the hospital, you have your nurses, you have your doctors, you have all the different stakeholders involved in the project, and it's almost like when you get into a project management culture, the person who is a project manager for the whole project has to be able to manage all the stakeholders very effectively in order to give the information to the person who is actually the boss or the person who's paying or the major stakeholder, making sure you handle them, making sure you handle the people who are working below you. And so it's almost like a juggling act where you are almost the most powerful person in the project, but you also have to recognize the fact of where you fit into the cogs and in the wheels. And well, it happens all the time in most offices where people are not sure, and that's one of the things that I'm finding in project management is that a project management ends up with so much power in any single project and so accountable for everything that's going on, yet there's so many stakeholders that they have to juggle in order to stay afloat and to make the project work. So I'm sure you've experienced that a few times in your work.
Yeah, and I guess that's one area I want to... Okay. Yeah, and the communication has to be both ways, and in my experience I found it a lot easier to understand and communicate with those people on a project at your level and below. So if you're working on a project and dealing with various managers in a business or industry and so on, as part of the project you're dealing with them day in, day out. You understand their strengths, their weaknesses, their moods, their communication. A lot of people communicate by body language, and if you're only talking to people on the phone, you have some difficulty doing that. So that's not a biggest problem as communicate upwards to the stakeholders in those particular areas. And I can tell you about a bit of an incident that I had. I was working on a fairly significant significant project. We received some external funding, and I had the full support of my boss in doing this project. He listened, he understood, he directed, and so on. And he said, "Yep, don't worry about the executive of the organization. I'm looking after that. Yep, just tell me what your risks are. Tell me what your problems are. Tell me what you need to do. Tell me what resources you need." And it was an ideal world. And little did I know until this person left that he was just telling the same thing to his peers. He was saying, "Don't worry about it. I'm looking after this all. Don't worry. Things are going along fine. You don't need to know about it. I'm looking after this." So when he left suddenly, there was a huge vacuum in the project. The executives of the organization didn't know what was going on, didn't understand the objectives, and were, it was a large project, so there were a lot of resources, a lot of money involved, and they, suddenly 3/4 of the way through the project got cold feet. And that was a huge issue for the project. So it was, and I blame myself as the project significantly in not making sure that every one of the decision makers clearly understood what was at stake and what was going on, and I relied on that the one stakeholder that I was communicating with, and not communicated with the other people that were involved to make sure that they were up to date in those particular areas. So that's a key area. And just to get back to your previous question, Darren, on why we have to do all this work. I mentioned this work we had done in Manitoba, and one of the first things we did as auditors was to make sure all aspects of PMBOK were being followed, which was really just project management stuff. And so the first thing we did, okay, you're spending, well, at that time we came in, they'd already requested another $8 million appropriation, so it was a $42 million taxpayer-paid project. So the first thing we did is, okay, you say you're following project management protocol, let's have a look at the charter. Charter, yeah, I did see one. I haven't seen it for a few years, and it took them about 5 days to find the project charter. So what we did was, when we found the project charter, it was the original. It was about 6 years since the last update. It had been the original request from the Ministry of Health to the government for funding for this project, and it had not been touched, seen, handled, updated in that time. And as part of the PMBOK requirements, the charter is really the touchstone. It's what you always go back to, and that my feeling is that project charter needs to be a living document. Everybody in the project needs to understand what's there. It needs to be reviewed continuously to make sure there are adjustments. Has the goal changed? Has the have the resources changed? Is the are any of the players changed in those particular areas? So that was one of our first major discoveries. Say, bring this out, have every one of the stakeholders in this project review the charter. Is what we said 6 years ago was what we want to do today, and you can bet dollars to donuts it wasn't what we want to do today. So that was one of the first things there, to make sure that was being followed, that any mid-course adjustments were documented and justified, which they had to be, because they were going to the government to ask for additional, significant additional funds for those particular areas. I guess we're getting close to the end here. The other point I want to make before we end is the importance of project managers not to view the project as the end of things. All projects have to be designed to transition to something. So you're delivering a product, a service, an item, and the client has to take that item and utilize the results of those projects. Nobody's going to pay a whole bunch of time and pay a whole bunch of money and use a bunch of time to do something they're not going to use. So the project manager always needs to keep their eye on the ball, which is a transition to operations, whether you're developing software, whether you're implementing software, implementing a process change, creating a new documentation, whatever it is. You always have to keep in mind that the client has to take that from at the end of the project, at the close of the project, and run with that. So you always have to look at what issues of governance. The governance of the project is going to be different than the governance the client has to use to maintain that particular product. And how do you set the client up to be success? So your project can be a huge success, but if the client drops the ball because the stage hasn't been set for that transition to operation, you've really lost all. Okay, any other questions, Darren? Did we lose you?
Because we the first thing, because we have hit the 30 minutes is it's very sad that it went by so quickly, because it was really nice to pick your brain with and some of the experiences you have. So I'm hoping that you come back sometime, and now that you know how to get on here, come on back anytime you wish, and we'll incorporate some of your expertise and some of your experiences into what we do, because sharing is what's going to make this work. And I love the fact that you have done some of these things and have experienced some of the heartache that goes with failed projects and success, and the exhilaration when a project goes well. So thank you for sharing some of your experiences, and thank you.
Okay, anytime.
All right. Sorry, guys, we're at the end of the time, so the time goes by very quickly always. And so I would like to thank you all for coming on again, and let's see how quickly this goes up on the webpage, and then we'll be ready to go. So thanks, you guys, and I'll see you next week at 11 o'clock.
Thanks, everyone.
Ciao.